slide and approve, I think, on the next slide. Yeah. So you received the January meeting notes from Linda a few days ago, if not a while ago. So we need to go ahead and review those and approve those minute notes from January. So any conversation about that before we go ahead and start voting? All right, hearing none, is there an approval to, is there a motion to approve the meeting notes?
This is Ioma. I so move.
Thanks, Ioma.
Second, Glass.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. All right, so since we're on Zoom, if you do not approve the minute notes, please indicate that by either raising your hand or coming off mute and saying that you don't approve. All right, it looks like the January meeting notes have been approved. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so now let's get into the end of year spending authorization. And what we are going to consider today, we're going to be looking at, depending if there's available funding, we're going to be thinking about bonus payments to the instructional staff. So Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you now to give us some more information about this.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, all. So those of you who are new, I want to be sure you know that this is something that for the third year, we are coming to you with for you to consider. The way that this would work is that we would be requesting that you consider authorizing us to spend any left dollars, any dollars that are not completely needed for reimbursements of the seats at sites from our instructional dollars. In the past couple of years, you have authorized us to provide a bonus payment to our teachers and instructional assistants. We aren't able to designate an amount because what we do is we wait and we work on all of the spending projections and we analyze and we actually project what that underspend will be and then calculate based on how many staff are in place. The reason we ask for it early, you might say to yourself, wow, why aren't we waiting until May to decide this? We have to plan differently depending upon whether we have this authorization or whether we don't in terms of our pacing of our expenditures as well as analysis of the needs of the program. So wanted to bring it to you. The last couple of years we have brought it to you in March, and it has been well received. We've given each year we've given you reports after surveying the staff about whether the bonus was impactful, how it was used, and you'll recall we made a full report back in the fall about the way that the instructional staff documented their use of the bonus, and we also would plan, if you choose to do this, we would also come back at the May meeting to talk to you about whether or not you want to allocate any dollars for classrooms. We aren't bringing that to you at this point because our classrooms have already received several bonuses this school year, both from Durham PreK as well as from NC PreK. So just happy to entertain questions about that.
So Linda, do you have any idea about what that bonus amount would look like at this point?
Right now, it looks like it would probably land at around $3,000. That is less than we have done the last couple of years. Between $2,500 and $3,000 is what it's looking like. What we wouldn't know for absolute sure until after March payments are made and usually around the beginning of April is when we're able to really nail down the actual amount. We also have to go through to see about eligibility for the bonus. We verify eligibility for staff because when there's turnover during the school year and new people may have come on board, we have guidelines as to how we assess whether someone will get a prorated bonus or whether they're eligible for the full bonus.
Great. And that would be for all instructional staff, teachers and assistants?
Instructional assistants, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Linda, this is Beth, and forgive me if you all have covered this at other meetings and I hadn't heard it, but I always support this bonus, but I'm wondering, in light of the federal emergency compensation dollars running out, it feels like this might be even more urgent, and I'm just wondering how that plays in here this year. And maybe it doesn't.
No, I think we're all very concerned and aware of the potential impact of the what a lot of people are calling the child care cliff. The stabilization grants will be coming to an end in North Carolina in June. The DCDE has been able to extend them longer than the original deadline. And many of our child care providers have used some of the stabilization dollars to help support salaries for their staff. And those are coming to an end in June. What we find typically is that for this public preschool program, the providers typically aren't using those stabilization grants to directly support their public pre-K classrooms. However, they are using it to support their overall program. The fact that, they're existing with their multi-age classrooms. And so certainly that the end of those resources is something that's looming large within the early childhood system. It is slightly different with our public program in terms of direct impact on the teachers' salaries for this year.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other thoughts or questions, or
I have a quick
Mhm.
question.
Sure.
And so these bonuses would go directly to the teacher and the IA, but not to the program or the classroom operations per se, the director of the childcare, but to the person. Is that how that would work?
So the way we've done it, so we have given classroom bonuses in the past. This is not that.
Okay.
We will come back about classroom bonuses in May, but this is paid directly to the teacher. It doesn't go through the site's payroll. And the way we do that is that, we work directly with the eligible teachers and instructional assistants to get their information, and we do pay them directly for those bonuses.
So this is June. I just want to say that, the teachers in that classroom really appreciate anything that you can all do. I wish we could do this throughout the center, but obviously we can't do that. But anything you can do is always very much appreciated. And if you look at, I think, the survey that you all did last fall, the majority of teachers are using this just for regular, rent or utilities or food, or, it's not like they're going out and having big vacations or something. They're using it for just regular living. So anything you can do is appreciated.
So just want to see how y'all are feeling today. It would be super helpful if we could vote on this now, as the group is determining funding going forward. It'd be just helpful to have this information readily available. So opening the floor, if anybody feels so moved to make a motion either way on authorizing a bonus payment to the instructional staff.
So moved.
Thanks,
Second.
Jason. Thanks, Beth. Okay, so then we'll do it again. If there's anyone opposed to approving this bonus payment, please indicate so in the chat or raise your hand. All right, not seeing anything. Great. All right, so motion has been approved. Motion has passed. Thank you all.
But we will report back, of course, to this group once we finalize all the information. We'll report back to you about the amounts that the teachers will receive and when they'll receive it, the teachers and instructional assistants.
All right, so next on the agenda, we are going to look at seat data across all of our preschool programs.
Okay, so I'm seeing that on my slide somehow the top two numbers got obscured. Not sure how that happened. Doesn't look like that on my screen. So I'll just tell you. So as you know, we have a community goal, as you'll remember, and our community goal over time is to expand our public preschool seats to serve up to 75% of the total 4-year-old census. And I always want to be really clear to our group and to the community that this goal is quite ambitious. It's very different from goals from other programs. You'll hear, if you're in the early childhood world, you'll hear a lot of times that the state, for example, has a goal to serve 75% of eligible 4-year-olds in NC pre-K. That word eligible gets thrown in there because that is definitely a game changer in terms of the numbers. And our goal in the Durham community is to serve 75% of the whole 4-year-old census, which means that we've got a lot of growth over time that has to happen. And again, I'm sorry about this, why this slide is obscured. I'm not really sure, but in 2022-23, we were across all systems, Durham pre-K as a locally funded seats, NC pre-K as state funded seats, Title I as federal dollars through the school system, dollars that come through for children who qualify for services through exceptional children's dollars, all different entryways. In 22-23, we were at 36% of the 4-year-old census. In 2023-24, this current school year, we are actually at 40.5% of census. And with our budget request for next year, we hope to move to 42%. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about the budget. And there is a slide later that you could see this. So let's move to the next slide. So we wanted to report out, we've been reporting all year. And when we do reports about our teachers and about our sites, we always talk about locally funded seats because that's our first charge, is to report to you about our locally funded seats for obvious reasons. But for today, we're going to talk about the whole. But for our locally funded seats, you can see here that we have 659 seats that are either fully or partially paid for with local dollars. So remember, we braid our services in Durham. We are all about leveraging our dollars to serve as many children as possible. And those 659, there are a great amount of data available if you ever want to take a deep dive into how the percentages roll out for each individual type of seat. But for the whole, this is reporting out on the 659 seats that are funded through local dollars. In terms of right now, I want to always emphasize that when we report out on enrollment, this is often point in time data. This is not an average for the whole year, but we do look across the whole year. Right now, as of March, we're at 94% enrollment percentage in those local funded seats, which is pretty pretty good. We're happy with, of course we would like it to be better than that, but we're happy with that right at this point. Next slide. So we're going to talk about the whole. So all year we've been saying we're going to report back on the whole. We're going to report back on the whole. It's very challenging to report on the whole, as you can imagine, because there's so many doorways that children enter through. And so what we've done is really look at where are we with the whole, and there's the next slide's going to go into more detail about the actual seats, but to let you know where we are right now, the census numbers for Durham for the current year say that there's 4,118 4-year-olds. That's the census documentation for this year. For this year, we're reporting out that we have 1,669 seats across Durham. And so that does put us at 40.5% of the census. So you can see we still have a long way to go to get to 75%. But we do know that the 75% of the total 4-year-old census is a long-term goal based on funding, based on our capacity in the community to staff and offer those seats. And we are committed to our model of growing by providing seat opportunities in every type of program: public schools, Head Start, private sites. And I saw that Yoma put in the chat about the fact that the census does tend to undercount young children, and this is for sure. This is a big issue. We know that it is an undercount. I think that we would love to be at 75% of what they have counted. But we know that once we start getting closer to that 75%, we know that we will still have further to go because of the undercount, which is definitely documented and is a very real problem in our society, that some people are not accurately counted for a lot of different reasons in our society. But this is where we are based on the numbers at the present. If you'll go to the next slide. So the thing is that there are lots of ways to try to explain and show what doorway a child came in through. And it can be quite complicated. We recently met with the county manager and some of the county staff, and we gave them a bunch of charts that showed all the ways that children are paid for and how their seat is providing service. But so you have to land on what is the way you're going to display it so that it is super clear. So for this purpose, what we've done to share with you where we are in terms of overall public preschool numbers for Durham County, we have categorized each seat. They are not duplicated in this count. And so, for example, we've done it by type of seat. So at private sites, for example, we know that we are braiding dollars, and we have some seats that are paid for by NC PreK in the private seats. Some seats are paid for fully by local dollars. Some seats are braided and blended, so they're paid for by more than those dollars. And so what we've done, though, is we aren't counting how many local seats versus how many private seats. What we're doing instead is we're saying how many seats are there in each one of these umbrella types of locations. So for this current year, we have 547 seats in private site locations, licensed childcare, all 5-star programs. There are 166 seats at Head Start, 563 seats in Durham Public Schools that are not under the Exceptional Children's Auspice. This year, there are 393 children. That's a point in time number for Exceptional Children's. You'll recall that Durham Public Schools is mandated to serve children with unique needs who are identified as needing services, regardless of whether there's a seat available. And so you'll see the reason there's nothing there for an enrollment rate is that they have to serve every child regardless, based on their eligibility. So this year, and as of February of 2024, there were 393 children being served under that umbrella, taking us to a total of 1,669 seats. Now, one thing to be aware of is that, for example, the 563 seats that are listed under Durham Public Schools, that is inclusive of the Montessori preschool classrooms, of which there are a couple, as well as the seats that are paid for through blended funding outside of those classrooms. So the way we're displaying this here, there's not duplication in the count, and it's categorized by where the seat is housed. So on the earlier slide, when we recorded that there were 659 locally funded Durham PreK seats, either fully or partially paid for, those are part of these numbers that are being recorded in this slide. So I wanted to open it up for questions because I know this is really important. This is how we're saying that we are, these numbers are what are guiding us to saying that we're at 40.5% of the recorded census numbers for 4-year-olds.
This is really helpful just to see all of this. And I know you've probably explained this, but my brain is on overload. Remind me. So when we're talking about public dollars, we're talking about state, local, federal?
Federal,
So,
yes.
so all of the funding. Okay.
Yes. Yes, our goal, so the county charged us with, of course, being good stewards of the local investment, but also being clear and accountable to what's happening as a whole in the county. Now you'll see, so for example, you see that under Head Start, their capacity actually went down this year. And that was due to some right sizing that Families and Community Rising was doing. And so what we are doing, our long-term goal is to expand access. And we are working with all the partners, the Durham Public Schools, Durham Partnership for Children, Families and Community Rising, to assure that we are doing everything we can to build that capacity where possible, while at the same time improving quality and investing in our teachers and in the needs of the children. So Beth was put in the chat about asking about how many children remained on the wait list after we filled our slots. So we have ongoing enrollment during the school year, and later in our meeting we'll do the program updates, and we'll address, we can talk about where we are with enrollment. But we do have some children on the wait list for the current school year, but at the moment, the majority of the children on the wait list are there because their parents asked and chose for them to be on the wait list because they were not comfortable with the seat they were offered. So there are a number of children on the wait list that were waiting for a seat to open at a specific school or for their situation to change with their family. We do give families the option to remain on the wait list rather than making their application inactive throughout the year. Your question is a great one. I think that for us, you said you were wondering about the unmet current demand. For us, what we know is that many families choose not to enroll, choose not to even apply for other barriers and reasons. So we know we have barriers such as transportation challenges, before and after school, wrap care, we call it wrap care, before and after school access. Because of the hours of the program, this program is a 6.5 hour day. And if the site doesn't have wrap care available, then working families, that's very challenging. Other barriers might be less visible to us. Some families may feel that the programs that they found that we were engaged with didn't meet their needs for some other reason. So it's really hard to say the unmet need. We believe that we are still in a process in Durham of educating families about the opportunity presented by public preschool, and also about how this contributes to long-term success for children. And so we believe there are some families that would apply if they had a greater understanding about the program. So we are very much in outreach and education mode related to how public preschool can make an impact in a family's life. So I think the unmet need question is very challenging. You'll recall back in 2018, when we did the supply and demand review for Durham County to look and see where our needs were. At that time, we found there was a real shortage of publicly available seats as compared to children who were actually living in federally identified poverty homes that were experiencing poverty. And we have grown our seat capacity, but we are not close to being, fully covering all the areas of Durham. Hopefully I answered your question. Other questions or comments? Okay. Well, I invite you, if you're interested in, for some of us who are data heads, you might have a strong interest in really understanding how the braided dollars are being allocated, where they're allocated, which program is accessing the most, all those nuances. And any of you that have an interest in that, we are more than happy to really take a deep dive and show where those Durham Pre-K local dollars are going. And for those of you who are newer to the table, you hear us talk about Durham Pre-K. Durham Pre-K is our overall vision, and we encompass and we address the community needs and program quality across all of the programs, the publicly funded programs in Durham. When we're talking about things that are specific to the local investment, we will clarify and say locally funded pre-K so that we are distinguishing. But Durham Pre-K is an umbrella that is collaborative program contributed to by Durham's Partnership for Children, Durham Public Schools, Families and Community Rising, and then CCSA's work with the local investment. So just want to kind of clarify that, because sometimes it can be really confusing because Durham Pre-K is a very broad umbrella, and that's why we try to be consistent and say locally funded versus other funds. Okay, next slide. We're gonna move to our next job today. So and before we really even get into this, I'll just say somebody said to me, well, why are we talking about reimbursement for next year? Well, as you can imagine, it is March. However, it might as well be August in terms of planning. Planning is a big job, and projections around funding, budget requests, seats for next year, all those things, as you can imagine, are a lot of moving parts. So we're going to talk about the next couple of slides. We're going to talk about considerations for reimbursements for service for next year. So we're going to look at our previous rate increases. We're going to give you a little context compared to rates in the community, and then we're going to ask you to consider a recommendation. Next slide. Okay. So we are asking, the staff is requesting you to consider a 3% rate increase. Obviously, this body can choose to do anything along the continuum of numbers, but our recommendation at this point is to consider a 3% rate increase for the upcoming school year. You'll recall that our present reimbursement rate is $1,400 per child per month. And for context, we had a few increases all close together. I've listed those here. We did a rate increase. Most recently, we did an increase, a 4% increase to $1,400. You passed that last May for this current school year. We had, because of the pandemic and inflation and all of the myriad things that were happening in our community, we had a couple of increases closer together. Prior to that, we were at the $1,250 reimbursement rate for quite a while. And so we're asking you to consider a 3% increase for this fall. Next slide. So we always, when we talk to you about reimbursement rates, we always want to give you context. And so presently, the wow, when we PDF'd these slides, they must have really smashed things. Tosh, I'm imagining, you're using the PDF version of the slides to show? Is that what you're doing? I'm going to assume that's what's happening. I'm sorry that the slides are smashed up together, but I'll walk you through it. Oh, that's right. Hammer's reminding me that Tasha's not able to unmute when she's running the slide deck. So I'm imagining that's what's happening and why the slides are smashed up, because the PDF must have done that, whereas I'm looking at the actual PowerPoint. Okay, so we'll just run through this. The current subsidy rate, represented by the green here, is $1,273. You'll remember that in our community, there are child care vouchers and there are child care scholarships, depending on which organization's running those dollars, to help families pay for child care. So the subsidy reimbursement rate for 4-year-olds at a 5-star center in Durham, based on the Durham market rate that's set by the state, is currently $1,273. The NC PreK rate in Durham, this is not the state reimbursement. You'll recall that the state provides funding for NC PreK that is only a portion of the cost to operate a public preschool, and the state says to local communities, figure out how you can find money to pay more for your reimbursement rate. So in Durham, the NC PreK reimbursement rate is $1,100 per child per month. The average private tuition as of March 2024 in Durham, in licensed private care, licensed fee-based care in Durham, is for 4-year-olds at a 5-star center, is $1,235. And the Durham PreK rate presently is $1,400. You can see that our request for an increase, a 3% increase, taking it to $1,442, that is where we estimate we think we need to move. So I want to move to the next slide and give you a little more context. So you'll recall, as you're considering an increase, we want to be sure and remind you that a site that is under contract to operate Durham PreK has a couple of funding streams from our local dollars. One is they get paid per child And that's the request we're making to move to 1,442 for next school year. But in addition, last year, for the first time, you passed a very innovative funding model that includes a pre-service payment. The pre-service payment is based upon the allocated seats for that site. And so if you increase the rate to 1,442, that will also increase the pre-service payment, because the pre-service payment is equal to 1 month reimbursement per allocated seat, not enrolled children, but allocated seat. And it's designed to be paid to the site in advance of the school year. There were some sites that did not get their pre-service payment until later in the year, but that was based on the site's ability to comply with the paperwork and that type of thing. We made every effort to pay people before school actually started, and most people did get paid at the pre-service payment prior to the start of services. The purpose of that you passed last year was to assist the sites with cash flow issues in terms of, those expenses don't just start when the children arrive. And then also to try to ease the challenge of sites not being paid for vacancies. When there's not a child in a seat, the site doesn't get paid for that child. And so we did a lot of work last year. Just wanted to remind you that the site gets reimbursed per child. They also get a pre-service payment. And then in addition to that, they get a teacher support payment. So they get a payment that's based on the actual teacher's license and credentials. So the actual teacher's salary. They get a teacher support payment every month to help them pay the higher salaries that we require. So that's just some context for around the reimbursement rate. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so where we are is the staff were recommending the 3% increase. Of course, that is your decision to consider what you would like to do. But it would be helpful to make a decision about the rate for next year today, and we would be delighted to accept a motion and a vote. But we can, full disclosure, we could wait until May. It really depends upon where you feel like you are with a decision like this, and if there's additional information you wanted us to come back to you with.
Thanks, Linda. Can we see the slide again with the rate comparisons? I just had a question. So the average private tuition, you said that was accurate as of
35.
Yeah,
March.
and that was March. I'm just curious, with the cliff coming, I'm just hearing things and I'm just wondering, are we going to see that go up? Because when the money goes away, providers are going to have to do something to maintain salary. So I would love to see that if it changes. Yeah.
Yes, and we do. Obviously, it's common sense that if resources are going to decrease, then the costs have to be covered somehow. And we do realize that private tuition rates are likely to go up significantly. Yes, we do believe that. And we do check these tuition rates. The reason we used March is we reported on this, in the past to you. And like when we were looking last fall, the average tuition rate was less than this. And what we can plan to do is send you a trend line, but we do believe it's going to go up. Yes, certainly we do.
Yeah.
Hey, Linda, it's Christy. I just wanted to add to that question. The CCR&R Council just did a survey of licensed providers to ask them what the impact of the end of stabilization grants might have. And those results are expected to be released next week, probably Tuesday. So be on the lookout for that. And I can't release that information yet, but what I will say is that it is very, very likely that you're going to see an increase. And what we saw in those results is that people have already increased. So some of that increase has already been captured in some of this because most centers have already increased and they're anticipating an additional increase. So yes, I think that's a very, very valid question. Thank you.
Thanks. Ioma, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Kathy.
Mhm.
And thank you, Linda. And I mean, I feel like it's in some ways it's a no-brainer, right? To sort of say, well, yeah, we should increase the rate. It may actually need to be higher. But I guess I'm also thinking in terms of, because it doesn't seem like it's that big in terms like it's much more $42, but just thinking in terms of, is there any potential downstream implication for when we're talking about trying to increase the seats, I think from 40%, the number of seats from 40 to 42, is that number, right? Something like that, right? So I guess just thinking through just downstream, what are the implications for that? However, though, I think in line with everybody else, we do anticipate some increase in costs, especially because we are obviously even waiting for Head Start to see what they'll do around the performance standards, where they've added more things around, medical leave, well-being, et cetera, et cetera. And we will hope that other programs within our Head Start will actually begin to make sure they provide some of those additional healthy well-being supports and economic supports to educators. So I do wonder if there's any anticipation of the potential downstream in terms of meeting sort of the number of seats that Durham would like to see.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So a couple things, and we are going to talk about budget and we could talk about that even before you make a decision about this, but we have requested an increase from Durham County for next year in order to add 45 to 70 new seats. Those of you who are new to this table may say, wow, why is it a big range like that? We do a range because as we begin each school year and children enroll, we place them in a seat based on what they qualify for, what type of seat, and then we braid those dollars. And so our costs kind of go up and down. So we always, when we're talking about growth, we always do an estimate as to how many seats we can buy with any increase. If we do, so I had someone say to me, why are you doing a conservative 3% recommendation? And our feeling was that we were trying to anticipate knowing we would need more resources, but also trying to balance the need for growth. And we don't know how much money we will actually be allocated by the county for next year. And that's reality. So depending on what happens with our budget request, if you pass a 3% increase in the rate, what we always have to do is we have to look at how much money is available for seats based on our projections for braiding, and then what the reimbursement rate factors in. It's possible that we wouldn't be able to add seats. So like, let's say that we didn't get the increase we asked for. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to add seats. An increase might mean that, if we didn't get an increase in the budget, but we had increased the reimbursement rate, we might actually conceivably lose seats. But our hope is that we would be able to maintain the number of seats we have this year, regardless of whether there was an increase or not. And the way that would be absorbed is most likely we wouldn't be able to do an instructional bonus for teachers and assistants next year, for example. There's a lot of unknowns, a whole lot of unknowns.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Is 3% enough? Like, tell us more about that 3%, because it has been 4% for the past few years, the increase. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we were thinking was, we don't know. So at the Board of Education, Board of County Commission joint meeting last week, the Durham Public Schools presented they didn't make a budget request yet, but they presented to the commissioners about their potential needs. And one of the things that they mentioned was that they are looking at a 12, for example, they're looking at a 12% increase in the local supplement for certified teachers, for example. And then also looking at what the state might increase. So we believe that potentially there will be some spike in the teacher salaries, and to maintain our program rule that teachers must be paid on the Durham Public School rate, we know that most likely we would be having to come back to you to review again our teacher support payment. You remember last fall, we increased our teacher support payment rate, but we believe we may have to increase it again. And so the 3% is more conservative that we wanted you to consider, knowing that we very well may need to come back to you to increase in other areas. The teacher support payment being a big. Do I think it's enough? I mean, no. I mean, I think, obviously things are very expensive and providers are being very challenged to have a sustainable business model, the private childcare programs. And we're very aware it's possible that if you do pass this 3%, it's possible that we would even have to come back to you in the next school year to even do an increase in the middle of the year, possibly.
Mhm. Yeah.
However, we do know from the BOE-BOCC meeting last week, the county made a presentation to the other elected officials and to the community, obviously, about their budget. And the Durham County government did share that they have decreased revenue from sales receipts this year. We've been in a boom. We had this boom of increased revenue in Durham County, which resulted in a lot of really great things for our children and families. But right now they did share that they do not have that increase presently. And they are looking at, in fact, they reported a flat budget for their internal Durham County committees. And there's certainly no promise that we will get an increase for next year. They were very supportive of our request when we met with the county manager. They were very positive in their listening ear, but certainly they did not make any commitments at this time.
Mhm. That's really helpful to know. And then one more question. Do we know anything about what the state is thinking about for NC pre-K reimbursement? No.
I have not heard about any increase that's on the table. I think Jamaica's on the call. I don't know if Jamaica, have you received any word about at all yet about next year?
No, but I was with some of them yesterday, some of the staff, and they, we talked about potential for increasing and things like that. Well, I advocated for it and everything, but mom was the word, so I didn't hear that they didn't even give me a wink and a glimmer of the possibility. So, well, I'm sure we'll hear about it soon if anything changes.
Christy, I see your hands up.
Christy, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I don't think there's been any decision. I know the division is working hard to try to increase that, but there's got to be additional dollars. So I do think there is going to be an ask of the General Assembly in the short session. Though it's hard because there's rules about that since the budget's already been passed in the long session. So my understanding is they're going to try to do something, but I'm not sure there'll be anything. But that's all I know.
Thanks, that's helpful.
So this is June. I certainly understand why you're advocating for this 3%, but I'm here to promote, to encourage you all to help the private providers as much as you can. And so just to give you an idea, we're raising the tuition over here at Yates for the first time in 3 years because we had all this stabilization grant money before and we didn't need to do that. And we're putting our tuition up 5%. as of August this year. I don't know what other providers are doing, but I'm sure many of them are having to do something similar because, you know, we're having given our staff extra money over the last 3 years, we can't very well come around now and say, you can't have it anymore. It wouldn't go down too well. So, you know, I understand the 3%, and I'm sure that, you know, your decisions are very valid here, but whatever you can do is always beneficial to those of us out here working in the field. Thank you.
Thanks, June. Okay, so if we can go down to the slide, I don't know, that one, yeah. All right, so here's where we're at right now. We have a decision to make. We can either make motions and approve to go forward with a 3% rate increase. We can wait until May. It would be super helpful, as Linda said, if we can vote today, if that's possible, but just want to see what is the pleasure of this group.
You know, Kathy, I feel like still go back to like, you know, is 3% enough, right? I feel like based on what we're seeing in the field, I think to your earlier question about whether 3% enough. And so I mean, because that's pretty much, if you look at where we are with inflation, it's pretty much a flat line, and some people argue probably a regression of some sort. So I guess I just wonder if, you know, again, I think we want to come back in May and look at whether, you know, we need to adjust the numbers. But I assume, Linda, you're asking for this now just to give you room to maneuver early on. But I also wonder if, you know, we should continue to send a message early, right? Because I feel like we want to be able to send a message early that, you know, it's only a recommendation, of course, that we are in precarious times, and we could read the tea leaves unless you're, you know, under the bush. So I wonder if we need to be a little bit more aggressive because of our continued commitment to ensuring that programs are sustainable, that they're funded at much higher levels than historically known, and especially for those who are serving probably a lot of children who are living in poverty and also dealing with a lot of different kinds of adversities. So I just wonder if we should consider something a little bit higher, even if it's more in the 5 to 6%. Again, just throwing that out there, as if we're trying to really do something significant, then let's do that as recommendation, so that the counties on notice that we have to do a lot more given what we're seeing out in the local, state, and also national sort of context.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ayoma. So yeah, I mean, the motion can be what the motion is. So if it's 3%, if it's more than 3%.
Can I ask if the next slide addresses our funding request to the county? Would you like to see that before you talk more about this potential motion? I just want to put it out there in case you do.
Yeah, Linda, can you share that? Can we go through that real quickly? And I mean, I think I would like to see the whole picture. Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, so what we've asked for was also a more modest increase than we originally wanted to ask for. And that was based on guidance from the county about their revenue stream and where things are. We were originally for this year hoping to ask for closer to 9 million. But we did ask for 8.246, and we were again, we were modestly hoping that this would cover a potential 45 to 70 new seats. In the past years, so back in 2020, we worked with the elected officials to try to project out an approximate gain of about 100 seats a year. That was our goal, you know, as we were trying to plan out over time. But you know, based on the reality of the workforce issues that are very real in our community, and attracting high quality teachers, all those things, we did dial back our potential new seats for this coming year. Again, like I said, when we met with the county, they listened, you know, very positively in terms of hearing what we were requesting. And, you know, but they certainly didn't make any commitments. They did reiterate that preschool is a priority in the local budget. And we also do know that there are a lot of competing needs happening in Durham. I feel cautiously optimistic that we will get close to our request, if not our full request, only because we have been this spending has been planned over time for, you know, for quite a long time. So one thing we could consider, one thing that we, in terms of planning, if you did want to do higher than a 3% increase, what we would do is we would take whatever you pass, obviously, and we would go back and do the projections, and then we would get back to the county and talk about any changes that we would need to project for new seats. So we would loop back to the county to say, based on increased costs, you know, we would be revising our projection for growth.
Right, because that's what it would come down to, right? Higher reimbursement rates, smaller growth. Keep the reimbursement rates the same.
Yeah, I mean, unless, right. I mean, and unfortunately, it's not truly, you know, it's not truly a clean approach because there's so many unknowns. If we were to get additional seats or additional reimbursement from state and or federal dollars, you know, if more money enters the system from other doorways, then the change might not be as significant. But for the most part, yes, if everything else stays the same in terms of resources available from other sources, the only place we could then save money would be to decrease the seat numbers.
No easy solutions here. Okay, so back to that previous slide. How are folks feeling? Anyone wanting to make a motion, or are you wanting to wait until May?
So
There's nothing. Sorry, I was just wondering, there's nothing that precludes us if we did the 3% now, like we could go back and raise it, right? Like that is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, we got chat happening. So Brittany, I'm comfortable with making a motion. We can always revisit in May if needed based on new information. Jason, I would offer an amendment to the recommendation to do 4% for consistency. So Jason, are you making a motion? Oh, Debbie, I see your hand is raised.
I was making commentary.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, Debbie.
Just a point of clarification of parliamentary process. Would this be a vote for which I would need to abstain as a recipient of those fundings?
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. So yeah, if we proceed with a vote, all providers, yeah, anyone who's receiving funding would have to abstain.
And on the call today, that would be Dr. Pittman, June Shalito, and Brenda Carter are the three folks on the call today that would need to abstain. If we end up with a voting motion.
So am I able to speak twice on this since I did offer that original commentary?
Please do.
So I guess the moment of clarity I would ask for, or a point of information, I believe earlier you said that we could offer a different increase and you all would take it for consideration, redo the projections, and then that will be brought back in May for an additional vote. Because I want to be mindful of the county's revenue, but I also want to be mindful that if we go backwards, it will be harder to go, you know, one step back as we'll keep going back. That's where my thoughts are on it. So if anyone else wants to make a commentary or, you know, take it the next step. I'm new to the committee, so I don't want to just be that guy.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then
it's wide open. You could make a motion for an amount, and the motion could include for us to come back and give you the implications in May, or you could pass something and then we would loop back to you. Either it's wide open. Sorry, y'all, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, you didn't. I was just going to where Jason was, which is in essence, like you want to, if you're gonna have a shot, take the shot right there. Like trying to like waft your way through for me is like, exactly to Jason's point, I think which is a smart point to really recognize that at least if you're gonna bring a number forward, have it be brought forward and as aggressive as you can, right? Because I can't remember what the county does. When you brought sort of some of the numbers forward, if they funded it in totality or always sort of cut it down a little bit. So, I mean, again, not knowing where the county budget is, but I feel like in the end of it, if we believe that 3% is a number or 4% a number, then okay, right? But if we think that really in the end, and looking at reading the tea leaves, which that's what they are, if we know it's probably going to be a little bit more, I guess I'm like, you want to at least put it forth in front of the county so that they can at least add that number as they make their broader considerations. So I guess I worry just the timing if we're like, let's go back and consider it. And it's like, it's too late. They're not gonna give us more money to increase it, to add more seats. So I just worry about, to Jason's really good point about, if we're gonna go ahead and ask for it, just put it in now, and then they'll make the reductions or they'll make the ask, right? I worry that we know what is basically in front of us in basically a couple of months.
Mhm. Yeah. And with the potential 12% increase in teacher salaries coming, that's a big number.
Point. So maybe you stick to the 3 and then because you'll have the 12. So I'll be quiet now. So was there a motion? I can't remember. I saw
No,
Brittany
not,
make a motion,
well,
and then Jason amended it a little bit or gave a commentary.
yeah. So we don't have a motion yet on the floor, but the floor is open.
I will say I like Jason's suggestion of 4% for consistency at the minimum. Though I agree about shooting your shot.
So I would, at this point, I would move for a 4% increase with a review at the May meeting with data to provide validation.
Thank you, Jason. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Brittany, second.
Thanks, Brittany. Okay, any discussion? All right, so Linda, does everyone have to indicate their approval, or can we do it like we have normally been doing it with, if you don't approve, let us know.
Yeah, that's fine. We just want to note again, like we mentioned earlier, that our recipients of funds are abstaining, which includes Durham Public Schools, Yates, and Families and Community Rising as conflicted. So the 3 of them won't be exercising their vote.
Okay, then, if there's anyone opposed to the 4% rate increase, with more information being shared at the May meeting, please indicate now either in the chat or by raising your hand. All right, I'm not seeing anything. So the motion has moved. Great, thanks you all.
Okay, thank you. And we will definitely report back to you at the May meeting in depth. Thank you very much. Let's move. We already talked about the budget, so we can move past that slide. So we're a few minutes over our break, but I'm sure you need it. When we come back, I know sometimes people have to leave. If you are going to leave, if you can just let us know. But we do have at least 1, potentially 2 more votes after the break.
All right, thanks everybody. See you after the break.
10:45.
Yeah, 10:45. All right, everybody, it is 10:45. Hopefully you've made it back. See, some cameras are coming back on. Oh, look at all the cameras coming back on. Nice to see your faces.
So Kathy, we have a couple of people who do have to leave at 11. I do believe this next voting item that we can, I think we can reasonably get that completed
Okay,
by then.
great. Well, let's get started. So,
Okay, and we've switched the slide deck. Jen is running slides now. I think we are on a version of the slides that might not have a any weird things. So we're bringing to you a discussion around instructional staff compensation. You'll recall that this time last year that you established a minimum wage rate for instructional assistants. And the way that passed was that you established that rate at a minimum to equal the Durham living wage of at that time of 1760. When that motion was passed, we did not clarify to establish a date of review each year, or we also did not specify specifically at that point what metric we would use in the future. So we're bringing this back to you because of obviously with inflation and changes and that type of thing, we want to establish a rate for next school year. We do really need a vote potentially today because with providers that have applied to be contracted to offer these services next year, we want to be really clear about what the expectation is for pay. So we want to have you consider a vote to establish on what kind of cycle you're going to review either yearly or if you're going to tie this minimum to a metric. Next slide. So to give you a little context, right now, the current year, you require that the instructional assistants make at least $17.60 per hour. However, providers can pay more, obviously, and based on experience and all that, they do. So our current, as of all of our wage monitoring for the current school year, our average instructional assistant hourly rate at the present, based on the actuals, is $19.70 per hour. The median for our current staff across all programs, the median is $19 an hour. Now, it's been brought to our attention that our funder, Durham County, is using a different wage rate. So Durham County presently has a living wage rate for Durham County that they are paying. Their minimum is $19.21. And in context for our current staff, 43% of the current instructional assistants across all sites, 43% of those that we have documentation for, there are a couple we don't have documentation for, but 43% of them make more than that 1921 at the present. When we passed this, we used the City of Durham living wage. That was the metric we used to bring the 1760 to you last year. Presently, for now, the City of Durham living wage for fiscal year 24 now is at $18.46 an hour. Based on our current staffing, 73% of our current staff make more than $18.46. So we wanted to bring this to your attention. I was asked why we weren't in alignment with the county since they're our funder. And basically, my response was that, we had established a living wage using a different metric, it wasn't intentional. It was just when we were passing this last year, to be honest, we weren't aware that they were using different tools when they were establishing their rate. So based on this information, we're trying to give you context. At the very least, we would want you to establish that you're going to look at the rate every year at the very least. That would be one thing. Right now, the way the motion was passed, our minimum is 1760 until you change it. At a minimum, we would want you to establish that you're going to review it every year, and we would want you to consider what rate you're going to have for the coming school year. Or you could choose to say that you're going to, every school year, you're going to adapt to the rate. Of course, not reviewing every year and just tying to a metric is a risky move in terms of not knowing what your resources are to work with. However, if you want to prioritize the wages of our staff, then you may say that, we really want to establish that we're going to change once a year with the metric. So it just wanted to bring that forth to you. If you can go to the next slide, we're just asking that you consider a vote. It would be helpful to have this today so that we can communicate early and often to our providers so they can plan for the rate. And again, we wanted to give you that context of how many staff are already at that rate in considering this.
Xavier, I see your hands up.
So I know we're working with braided funding, and I'm willing to accept a braided answer. But just for my understanding, in the context that we're in, the burden of, and I know the vote today is not to change any rates, but just so I understand the full picture, the burden of aligning wages to the rate that we suggest is on the providers or not?
Yes, so if we establish a minimum rate, which we have a minimum right now of 1760. So what happens is the provider must adapt their budget to pay at least that to their instructional assistants. We don't, so for clarification, in terms of those funding streams that I mentioned, the funding that we give to our operators, they get a reimbursement which you've just increased by 4%. That reimbursement, they get a teacher support payment that helps cover the salary of the certified teacher, not the instructional assistant. So that teacher support payment is tied to the credentials of the BK license of their teacher. And then they also get the pre-service payment that we reminded you about. So those are the three ways that sites get resources from us to then create a budget to pay their staff and pay for everything.
And then Brittany's got a question in the chat, but providers are provided a salary supplement from Durham PreK.
Yeah, and that we call it a teacher support payment because when in the community, when you hear salary supplement, a lot of people get confused with the state and the local school system. So we call it a teacher support payment, but it only addresses the credentials and experience and the wage for the certified teacher because we require those teachers to be paid on the Durham Public School scale, and it is a substantial investment. And you'll recall that when you passed that, the purpose was that you didn't want our sites to be hiring the least qualified teacher so that they would have a cheaper salary. So that teacher support payment is tied to the actual credentials of the actual teacher that a site has hired. And if that teacher leaves and a new teacher comes, then we look at that teacher's credentials. So the teacher support payment is a monthly payment that helps the provider meet our salary requirements on the Durham Public School scale. We don't provide a separate supplement for the instructional assistant's wage. That is part of the budget that's established through the reimbursement rate.
Thanks, Linda. That's helpful.
But based on the data you just showed us, our $17 is already woefully inadequate to meet living wages, correct?
Yeah, if Jenna, if you'll go back to the previous slide. So the 1760 as a living wage was what the city of Durham had posted last year. So we are below the current metric that was used last year. But if we use the same metric in the future, your new rate would be 1846. So yes, we are below that. Our current staffing, as we shared, we have a lot of the market drives obviously what you're going to pay to get an instructional assistant. And so many of our instructional assistants are paid more than our minimum, of course. And so that's why we provided you with that info about the 73% currently make more than the 1846.
Mhm. Yeah, and Linda, Jason has a comment. Yeah, he was curious on the pay, candidate, employee quality conversation. Yeah, as it relates to effectiveness and retention. Yeah, retention is big. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had planned in the May meeting is typically when we talk a lot about, you know, what our staffing retention has looked like. You'll recall last fall we presented to you about the credentials of our teachers and our instructional assistants, but we're always mindful of retention, and we do find that the last few years when you have authorized a bonus, in our surveying of staff, the bonus comes up regularly as being very helpful to them in meeting their life expenses. And that is in addition, but it is a bonus. We don't include that in our salary requirements because obviously it's dependent upon whether or not we have the resources to do any type of bonus. I saw in the chat also that Brittany mentioned about would Durham Public Schools be held to the same standard? Yes. So let me just share that we enter into contract with private providers, with Durham Public Schools, and with Families and Community Rising to operate seats. Durham Public Schools did request a waiver last fall, and we know in our community that the school system is committed to reviewing their salaries and working through their desire to compensate their staff in more robust ways. So that's an ongoing thing in our community right now with them looking at their wages. But yes, the waiver that you passed for Durham Public Schools for the current school year was only for a temporary waiver for the current school year. The expectation would be that whatever you set as the minimum has to be met by all operators.
And the ask for now is to establish a review date.
A review date and or a specific metric. Like so let me back up. For ongoing purposes, we would like to set a review date. And ideally that review date, if you choose to have a yearly review, would come in March of each year in order to give us planning time. So we actually do need two things. We need you to set a review date and or a specific metric. But we also need you to vote on a rate for this coming year would be very helpful. We could defer till May, but it would be helpful to do that now. If you don't vote, if you choose to defer, then we will keep our 1760 minimum until such point as you make a vote.
And then just to reiterate, if we defer, then providers won't have the full picture until after we vote.
They will, right. If you defer, then providers will be planning to pay at the minimum of 1760. And for any, in particular for any new hires presently, as we shared, all of the currently working instructional assistants meet the minimum of 1760. Even the Durham Public Schools instructional assistants that are presently employed meet that minimum right now. The waiver that they requested last fall applied at that time, but now they do meet that 1760 right now.
Thanks. All right, so we've got two things in front of us. Do we want to go ahead and make a motion and vote on setting a review date and or thank you, or a rate, tie the rate to a metric? So that's one thing. And then do we want to go ahead and vote on what the IA salary rate should be for next year?
I'm comfortable making a motion to establish a yearly review date for March of each year.
Great. Thanks, Xavier. All right, we've got a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jason. Any discussion?
I have a quick wondering, what percent increase is 1760 to the number that, not that we're voting on that part today, but I'm curious about that. We can calculate that later. Never mind.
I can
do
calculate
wonder.
it while y'all talk. I can do that.
I'm trying to think through the risks of tying it to Durham counties. I guess my bigger concern being the negative impact if it goes down. Could you all talk maybe a little more about the risk of tying it to a metric?
The risk from our lens as staff, the risk, we have not analyzed whether it would go down. I'll be honest. What we were seeing as a risk would be that it would go up to a point that the budget, that you would not feel the budget could support. I'm not, we were more concerned about, so for example, last year it was 1760. If we used the same metric, which was the city, now it's 1846. The question would be called to say, are you committed to this living wage no matter what? And therefore, no matter how high it goes, you're going to establish that as the rate. It might, in some years, depending on the budget, might mean fewer seats. It's hard to say. We would have to do that analysis. And that's why no matter what, we think it's important to report to you every year. But in terms of the establishing a date to look at it, even if you were to tie it to a metric, we would always want to report out to you about it. I'm sure there are cases where it would drop. I haven't experienced that myself, but inflation has been extraordinary and it could level out and it could get better and maybe it would go down. Don't know.
And we can always revisit this at a later time. Yeah.
Oh, yes, always.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, so we've got a motion and a second on the floor. So now let's go ahead and indicate if anyone is opposed to this motion, please indicate in the chat or by raising your hand.
So just to re-clarify, this motion is to establish a March of each year review date of the instructional assistant's wage.
Correct? Correct, Xavier. Okay, great.
Yeah, I purposely left off the part about the metric. I can amend it if it's if that would make it real clear. Okay.
I think we were just wanting to make sure that's what we were voting on. Okay. So we're good with that. Motion has passed. Okay, so now then the second thing, how do we feel about setting the rate for the upcoming school year? That's something we
So to
want to
answer Debbie's question about the amounts, if you stayed with the city of Durham and moved to the 1846, that would be basically a 4.8% increase in the base. That's the city, rate. The other thing is looking at the county rate. We have not been directed. We have not been told that because we're funded by the county, that we need to abide by that. But that is, certainly, if that were to change and we were told that, we would bring that back to this group, obviously. But as far as staff go, we don't have a recommendation about which rate to use. We felt that tough decision we would obviously leave to you. Jenna, can you go to back to the previous slide while people are thinking so they have those numbers in front of them? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. That's super helpful. So there are lots of numbers on here. We've got the city wage, we've got the county wage. You can see what the median right now is for the IAs in the Durham PreK programs. And then remember what we've got it currently set at is $17.60 an hour. So it's really open. What are y'all feeling? What are the thoughts?
This is living wage for an individual or a living wage for what size family?
I'm embarrassed to tell you that I don't remember when we pulled the information. I believe we did it from a family. I'm pretty sure we did it for a family, but I apologize. I don't have that in front of me. We can certainly, defer till May and bring that back to you if obviously that's an oversight on our part.
So since we're doing discussion, it just and we're just talking about how it feels to read it and hear that these folks are paid under the living wage. So it's kind of like, you almost feel obligated to at least bring it to a living wage or what's considered to be a living wage, because in RDU, when I drive from my house to downtown, I'm passing a lot of houses I can't personally afford. So it just, almost for this slide, it's like we probably should have posted our wage as well so that you can draw a direct comparison. Because I almost typed it in an Excel sheet over here just to get, I don't know, it does make you feel a sort of way like, okay, these folks this is what they're getting paid. They're under the living wage, that this is the living wage, and knowing how much gas and bread cost, it is a weird reality of the life we live. But then also, we've done a number of wage corrections, but that's just, feelings and thoughts that I'm having looking at this and hearing this conversation.
Thanks, Jason. And Joy has a comment, in the chat. Do we know anything about why some aren't being paid the recommended living wage? Is it because centers are unable to afford that wage?
Okay, so for clarification, all of our programs are in compliance with the living wage of $17.60 that was in existence when we passed this rule last year. So everyone is paying at least the $17.60. As we reported, our median rate right now is $19 an hour. In general, childcare programs, however, the wages are very low as compared to this. An instructional assistant in traditional childcare makes a very low rate. And in fact, in about a month, the statewide workforce study will be coming out that will update the data available about wages in childcare across the state of North Carolina, and we will get information about Durham from that state workforce study report, and we will bring that to you in May. So in typical childcare, in this program, our wages, we have set that standard, and our living wage is $17.60 that we set last year. It's just basically due to change. It's due to it has increased. The city of Durham wage that's published is $18.46 now. But it is hard for typical childcare programs to cover the cost of wages. I mean, that is a fact. And that's one of the reasons why this program has established such guidelines about and reimburses to a rate to cover these higher wages.
Just jumping in to add, I also feel a way about the idea of people not making a living wage to be able to support their family. But I also think there's a non-altruistic argument to be made here. The research does show that when folks are struggling with their own economic stress, their ability to show up and be present and have those kinds of social emotional interactions with kids that we want them to have obviously is difficult. And so I think there is a quality conversation to have here about making sure the folks who are the instructional assistants are able to show up in a way that they really can be prepared themselves to provide full quality. And if you're worried about feeding your own kids, that's not going to be the case. So I definitely think we should raise it pretty significantly myself.
Are there any thoughts on how these wage increases would affect the sustainability of the centers, or does that weigh in at all? I mean, if it doesn't hurt, if it won't cause us to lose centers, I'm in support of matching with the annual review. You're not making a motion or anything, but just those are my thoughts.
We do try to reimburse and cover the costs that we expect providers to put out for these classrooms, but certainly across a whole childcare program, the stress and the resources are creating additional stresses that may impact whether programs can stay open, not related to this Durham PreK program, but related to the state of childcare in general.
And I was just going to add, Linda, to the question too, which is right. So we also know the biggest sort of cost for many childcare providers, operators, is the workforce cost of it. And so being able to say that minimal DPK is going to at least honor that, because obviously if you can't pay even the basic minimum wage or living wage, then you're going to lose your workforce. If you don't have a workforce, you don't have a program. So there's this sort of like, you got to, keep your workforce that you have invested in. We know continuity matters for our children. There's a whole host of things. So being able to ensure that the workforce is there or being paid well actually has implications for that business and or that program actually being sustainable long term.
Yeah, Debbie.
I want to build on Jason's wondering and our previous vote of we raised the reimbursement rate to 1442, which is what percent? How will that offset some of this reimbursement rate requirement for the IA instructional assistants? Will that help the centers manage that a little bit?
Yeah, so you just passed a 4% rate increase.
Was it 4? Okay.
4 is what was passed, so it's actually more than the 1442 that we had mentioned. So you passed 4 rather than 3, and certainly that will help. There are the sites get paid per child, and those reimbursements are what help them create a budget to operate the program. I will say, just for point of time, we are way over time for this item. We do have one other item that is urgent for today for us to talk about. If you feel that you need more time, we can certainly bring this to the May meeting and provide you with additional information if you're not ready to make a motion.
Thanks, Linda. All right, so I'll do one last call to see if there's a motion.
So moved.
So Jason, what's the motion?
My motion is for this committee to, what we do is just a recommendation to the county managers, I believe. But so the motion is for the current rate to match the living wage rate presented on the slide of the county, I believe was 1926. 1921. I move that we match the 1921 as it is the county living wage to be reviewed when we review in March. So match it now and review the rate again during the next review. If that makes sense. I think, I would accept any clarifying amendments to the motion.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor to match the county living wage rate at 1921 and then to revisit it next March. Is there a second?
This is Neoma. I can second.
Thanks, Ayuma. All right, so we have a second. Okay, any final discussion before we go to the vote? Okay, then. So we'll do like we've done all along. If anyone is opposed to the motion of matching the county living wage at 1921 and revisiting that next March, if you're opposed to that, please indicate so in the chat or by raising your hand.
Don't have any conflicted members. Everyone who's a voting member can vote on this motion.
Thanks, Linda. All right, I'm not seeing anything, so it looks like this has passed. Great, thanks you all. The motion has passed. Wonderful. So this will really help. Yeah, thanks. Okay, next on the agenda, Linda.
Okay, so we're bringing this forth. I want to share with you that we have had a request from Durham Public Schools to consider approving a pilot classroom to serve 3-year-olds for school year 24-25. What that would mean would be at the new school, Murray Massenburg, that will be opening in the fall. There will be 3 preschool classrooms. Their request for a pilot would be that one of those classrooms would serve 3-year-olds and would be a classroom that would be blended, where the request for us would be to fund 9 3-year-old seats through DPK resources, through local Durham PreK resources. The other seats in the classroom would be funded through Exceptional Children's Funds to the district. And I'm going to ask Debbie to talk a little bit about their requests for the pilot and give you a little more information.
Thank you, Dr. Chappelle, and good morning, everyone. So part of this is stemming from the child find, where students are screened for exceptional children's services. And we have a pretty robust pre-K assessment process to identify children. And we begin that when they're 2 years, 9 months. Child find activates so that if a child qualifies for special education services at 3 years old, that we are positioned to serve those children. Historically, through the years, many of the children who qualify are already in childcare services settings, or they are at home and the parent prefers to keep them at home. We'll send itinerant teachers either to the childcare settings or to the home as needed, or various throughout the community. Recently, what we have found, though, the IEP, or Individual Education Plan teams, are indicating that some of the 3-year-olds could benefit from a school environment with age appropriate peers. And so the district has been exploring how to create instructional environments that would honor that IEP. And we've been looking at 3-year-old programs with blended. We started a program without secure funding, but we were curious whether how this would look and how it would work. And so our initial program was up at Mangum, and we're finding it's too far out, and families just are often declining that opportunity because of the location. So we have an opportunity now at Murray-Massenburg, centrally located. Our exceptional children's department leadership is very excited about taking one of the 3 classrooms that has been retrofitted and designed specifically for pre-K children. We originally had thought we would open 3 licensed classrooms with 4-year-olds. And so we were seeking 45 seats and seeking support for some sort of stabilized funding to go that route. In the meantime, we've also been looking at the 3-year-old programming and began the conversation of wondering, what if we open a licensed classroom, but streamline up to 18 seats, 9 of which would be regular general education students, pre-K, and then the other would be primarily slots for the exceptional children's program. So we were meeting with Linda and the team earlier this month, vetted this brainstorming, and she indicated, let's bring it to governance and see where this conversation goes. I also have on the call Karen Thompson, our Director of Early Education. So she's here to answer any questions as well.
So just for point of clarity, basically what we shared with the district was that, we would not have authorization to spend those local Durham pre-K dollars on any children other than our 4-year-olds without governance approval. So over the long run, you'll recall that a year and a half ago at this governance meeting, we had some breakout sessions talking about services for 3-year-olds because the pre-K task force that originally formed back in 2017 that led to the development of a locally supported preschool program, that the original goal is in the long run to serve 3 and 4-year-olds. But first starting with 4-year-olds. And a year and a half ago, when we had some breakout groups among this governance committee, we talked about what 3-year-old services might look like in general. At that time, governance felt strongly that and this again was during the school year 22-23 is when we last discussed this at governance a year and a half ago. Governance at that time felt that they wanted to see more progress toward our 75% of 4-year-olds goal prior to considering services for 3-year-olds. So that was at that point. And so this request for a pilot for 3-year-olds is obviously very small, and would be something that you would need to authorize if you chose to allow for it.
So I think because we're at 40% of we're serving 40% of 4-year-olds right now, and the goal is 75%. We still have a long way to go to get to that 75%. That's one reason I'm hesitating about the 3-year-olds. I think the other thing that gives me concern, as a former 3-year-old teacher for 10 years of my life, 3-year-olds are really different from 4-year-olds. And I think it's going to take some time. The NC pre-K and the Durham pre-K curriculum and standards and guidelines are great for 4-year-olds, especially 4-year-olds turning 5. but more work needs to be done to make sure that those classrooms and that those teachers are ready for brand new 3-year-olds who are really different than 4-year-olds. So those are my two thoughts on this idea.
So Beth put in the chat asking if we could speak more to how we are currently serving children with exceptional needs. So Debbie, would you like to speak to that?
Absolutely. I may invite Ms. Thompson to chime in. Karen, are you still on the call?
Yes, I'm here. So currently we have our exceptional children's program serves students in some of our inclusive classrooms. We have, because our inclusive classrooms are blended. We also have exceptional children's programs that are separate programs. These programs are not inclusive programs within our preschool programs. So we are serving our exceptional children in different models.
Can you confirm real quick? I mean, when you say different models, I assume most of that is obviously inclusion. So the inclusive classrooms.
So some of our students are inclusive classrooms, but we also have exceptional children's preschool programs that are not inclusive programs. So we have students that have services that like one of our classrooms, we're calling our developmental needs classrooms. The students come from for the amounts of time based on their IEPs. So they're not necessarily in our classrooms in the inclusive setting, but we do serve some of our students in our inclusive classrooms.
Thank you for that. So I'll just chime in real quick. In that, Kathy, I think your point about trying to reach as many 4-year-olds as possible, which has always been how pre-K has been so 4-year-old focused. And I think even before this committee was formed, I think I was still in Nebraska for a minute. And I remember, I think right into Linda and Donna Marie who were leading the earlier version. And I sort of implored that a focus on only 4 is actually late. And so some of us will actually, say that, a lot of the 3s across the board are being left out, right? So because just the way the funding has worked with, an infant toddler is a whole different ballgame. So of course, I always think that, 3s are, we're such a critical age as well, just in terms of time and brain development, et cetera. And so, and I know from, being able to think through that, and we're seeing a lot of states and local spaces trying to figure out how do we also, serve our 3-year-olds in our larger pre-K work, because we know the infant toddler slots are necessary as well. So I just bring that forth to just say that, yes, I do think that obviously the vision was to start with 4-year-olds and really fully make sure that 4-year-olds have a seat, but also just trying to bring forward to the committee about just the science that, really as early as possible is most important. And so if there's a way to get 3s on there, I would definitely encourage it in many ways, because we just know there's a year of high quality doesn't get us anywhere. Evidence has been pretty clear as not sustained. There's not a sort of a consolidation of knowledge with only 1 year. We see that with our Head Starts, right? Just in terms of the impact, right? So the more time you get in high quality programming, the better you are. So being able to get children at 3, 2, could be really, if we're looking to really think about children's development across the early years. So I'll just put that forward. But obviously, the priority was always 4-year-olds fully being served and making that possible. But I do want to sort of bring the science forth about just the early years writ large, and not forgetting that the earlier the better.
So I am noticing we got some great chats and the great comments in the chat, but we are 1 minute from the end of our meeting.
Yes. Yeah, and I think this is obviously a very weighty subject. And I think that reasonably what we could consider doing would be to have it, the quality subcommittee has a meeting in April. The quality subcommittee, you'll recall, some of you who are new may not remember that quality subcommittee is a subcommittee of this group. and also includes members from other places in the community. The quality subcommittee could certainly talk about this some more, and we could bring it to the May meeting for consideration. The impact of waiting until the May meeting, there may be some unintended consequences of that we would have to work through. But I think that obviously this is a big decision, and unless there's strong support for it for a motion today, we can certainly talk about it more in May.
Yeah, it does feel like we need to wait till May to make the decision.
We certainly appreciate the opportunity to share some of the brainstorming we've been ongoing and really seeking ways that children can be served with more age appropriate. But thank you, and we'll look forward to further conversation.
So we will get, we'll get you, we'll work with you to get you an opportunity to be on the agenda for a longer period of time for the May meeting.
All right, y'all. So we're out of time.
We are out of time. The rest of our agenda was really about updates, which you received an update document, and also, received some additional information through the slides. The big thing to lift out is that our teams are following up with a lot of work around STEM activities, incorporating, embedding science-based learning and into our preschool programs. And then lastly, reminding you that our next meeting is May 16th. It is scheduled to be in person. And we can, if you would like, we can send out a poll to take the temperature of the group about whether that's still okay for that meeting to be in person. We would also make online available, so it would be a hybrid. And then we can certainly defer to the next meeting to talk about the meeting schedule for the next school year.
I did want to flag, Linda, that there has been some rumbling that May 16th may be a child care advocacy day at the legislature. So I did just want to flag that.
Oh, good point. Good point. So we can send some follow-up and do some polling of our members to see about that date, as well as whether or not we still are committed to having an in-person meeting. We can do that.
All right. Thanks, everybody. So Linda, remind me, do we need a motion to end the meeting? We do.
Probably a good idea.
Okay, great. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Really? Nobody wants to leave?
Well,
so moved.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
well,
Thank
there.
you. And then a second.
I'll second.
Wonderful. Okay, then if everyone approves, feel free to leave. If you oppose, stick around and we'll keep meeting. Otherwise, I hope you all have a lovely end of March and April, and we'll see you in May.